I have put up today. Thank you so much. I am going to be the closer. I'm going to dovetail everything that we've heard about today, which is kind of funny. I kind of consider this like speaking to the choir, preaching to the choir, which is why I have that lovely photo from when I got to visit all you lovely folk up in Newcastle. So I'm going to do a very short presentation, very short, about why WordPress with your pal, Alison Kay. This is not a technical talk. This is not going to be delivering numbers to you. Instead, I'm going to get you thinking not just about WordPress, but also critically about all content management systems as far as why do we have them and why do we want them and what should we be looking for? My background is a web and brand consultant. I founded the WordPress community here in Halifax. We have the first WordPress conference here in Atlantic Canada. We're the only WordPress conference or meetup east of Montreal in Canada. I'm wearing a WordPress shirt, but it does not mean that I think that WordPress is perfect for everything. But in my everyday interaction in my business, which is Alison Kay Consulting, I don't work with new business. I work with established service-based businesses, so I don't do e-commerce. I don't help brand new businesses. I work a lot with individuals and businesses, small, medium businesses that are trying to grow leads and already have a little bit of a sense of what's going on in the internet and with their websites, but they want to get more out of it. So this talk today is very short and it's more about top level conceptual ideas of the pros and cons of WordPress. So the first thing that's been kind of hammered into all of our heads for everyone else's presentation is how accessible WordPress is. And this is a graph from builtwith.com outlining that WordPress is still indeed the top dog. Although, take it with a grain of salt in this one, they actually stuck cPanel as an option for CMS usage, and that's a little strange. But I like showing this to a lot of people because I often hear things like, well, I don't think WordPress is doing so well because I've been seeing lots of ads for Squarespace. Now, I will say that when it comes to marketing, WordPress has a long way to go, and that, of course, has to do with it being open source, and there's kind of two flavors of WordPress, which we'll get into. But you can still see from a usage perspective, WordPress is still kicking it out of the park. And of course, this is only sampled from the top 1 million sites, but it gives you an idea that it's been around since 2003. It's now 17 years old. In Canada, it can drive a car. It can't yet vote, but it's having a good time. It's getting there. So when we're talking about WordPress, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritties about it today. I'm the last presentation of the day. It's very late for some of you. It's almost supper time around here. But I did want to mention that WordPress comes in 2 flavors, depending if you like your vanilla or you like your chocolate. So that comes in the 2 flavors known as WordPress.com and WordPress.org. And the .com is the one that you see most often hosted at WordPress.com. So while WordPress is open source, it kind of is like a Jekyll and Hyde or a Hydra with 2 heads, if you will. There's 2 different ways you can serve up WordPress. And the WordPress.com is hosted by the WordPress team known as Automatic. And this is ideal for beginner bloggers. It's pretty much a done-for-you solution. They include technical support if you want to have it. It's a great place to get started with WordPress before you go whole hog into the .org location. Although some of their features are limited depending on what package you do buy with them. And an interesting note about them is they're quite sex positive. So if you do happen to be a sex worker or other kinds of individuals, you're trying to sell certain products, WordPress even has a way to make sure that you're on a kind of server that will actually allow that. So little known fact about WordPress, it's quite sex positive in that way. So if you're trying to get started with WordPress and you just want to kind of dip your toe into it, we'll often recommend .com. And then on the other half, we got good old-fashioned .org, which is the one that I work mainly in, and mostly what our own WordPress meetup in Halifax is focused on. So this one, you pretty much are the master of your universe in this case. So you can have it hosted wherever you want, which is great. And we'll kind of get into that owning your own content and moving it around so that you're only working proprietary things that you want to have. It's also ideal for business. Not that WordPress.com isn't a great option for business sites, but you kind of get to a point where you need to sort of drop yourself out of the nest and kind of fly out on your own. And so .org is a self-installed, self-hosted, or hosted with different companies version of WordPress. And so because of that, the support gets a lot trickier. You're not going to get a one little button click to chat and have someone help you with all of your WordPress needs. It's going to be dependent on the theme you buy, dependent on your hosting, dependent on your security and all the plugins that you have. So there's definitely more to herald in that spec. And of course, because of that, you're responsible for technology. I love we were looking at Wix just a second ago and also with Squarespace, that you have that thing where you get a lot of options, but you don't get all of them. And that's great because technology is being taken care of for you by those platforms. But WordPress, with great, with great options comes great responsibility. Of course, the more options you have, the more you're going to have to herald that as a website owner, and of course, that does result in a steeper learning curve. So I'm going to be focusing primarily on .org, although a couple of these sentiments are definitely going to echo inside of the .com platform. So the first pro is you own it. And to me, this is probably one of the most critical aspects of open source that a lot of people don't understand when they get into content management systems, is that as wonderful as Wix and Weebly and Squarespace are, if that company decides to charge in doubloons tomorrow, if they decide that they want to completely forget about SEO, you're stuck with them. They own it, and deep in their contracts. Another one I think is web.com is one that used to build websites, and they actually had in the contract, if you terminated early, it was 2,000 Canadian to do that. So to me, the biggest point of WordPress is that you own it. Because it's an open source, we are building on each other's shoulders. So proprietary is nice because you get other people doing the work for you, but you're also beholden to the changes that they make, the way they run their business, and ultimately what they're going to offer you as a service provider. The next one is WordPress is hella well supported. Now, again, I did say earlier that you can't just ring up a certain person and they're going to give you all the answers that you need compared to reaching out to somebody perhaps with Wix, for example. But because it's been adopted for so long and because the community is so large, you can swing a dead cat anywhere and it'll hit someone who knows a little bit about WordPress, all the way to WordPress developers and beyond, WordPress marketers, WordPress search engine marketers, people who work with WordPress and doing pay-per-click campaigns. So it's incredibly well supported in that methodology, and that's great to know that with its being at 17 years old and the way that people have sort of really taken to it, because it does that balance between ease of use, accessibility for those who are technical, you won't be wandering alone in the desert when it comes to working on your WordPress site. And the one that I think doesn't get talked about enough about WordPress is it is excellent for SEO. I don't have the link available, but Rebecca Gill has a wonderful, always updated article where she actually ranks all the top CMSs. Do note she does work a lot with WordPress, but she goes all the way from top level, all the way technical SEO, and talks about how well WordPress responds to this. We have seen a little bit with Wix. Wix is a great starter, but the problem with Wix is that just because you can build, or Wix or Weebly are in the same boat, just because you can build whatever you want doesn't mean that search engines can actually digest that content in a way that's going to help it with search intent. So when it comes to if it's really important in your business or your nonprofit or in whatever you're trying to do on a website and you want to be reached organically, WordPress is going to be the one you're going to want because it's going to give you more access and ability to be able to go in and play with what you need and also work with the changing whims of SEO. And I also want to preface that I know diddly squat about Drupal or Joomla, so I'm sure there's lots available around that. I'm simply talking from my own experience with WordPress, and I know a little bit about Squarespace and Wix and Weebly. And of course, I couldn't go on about it without the positive community. And I really liked hearing our first presentation and seeing another individual who's so gung-ho with contributing and also creating community. I have a design background, so it was all good old-fashioned print, although I was always into coding websites from a very young age. Everybody else was having boyfriends, and I was having websites and forums, let's say. But the thing about the positive community of WordPress is when I finally got involved, I was blown away with the accessibility, with the diversity, and with the push for change inside the community. Not to say that it's perfect. There are absolutely still bad players in any community. There are lots of things that are rough around the edges that we're trying to do. But what I like about WordPress is, again, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting somebody who's involved in the WordPress community or getting into it. You have a situation like today where people are encouraged to talk because we do believe in WordPress that to talk about your experience and to gain knowledge, there's no such thing as a WordPress expert, just someone who might know a little bit more than you. And in that positive community as well, I've seen more changes such as there's more initiatives happening within the project as far as training individuals from a diversity speaking perspective to gain that knowledge. And the other great thing about WordPress is that even if you don't want to adhere to what the larger project wants to do, you're still allowed to create your own meetups. You're still allowed to get involved and help out. And so it's a wonderful community. And I think when you stop thinking about a CMS as just this technical thing that's supposed to do a job for you, and you see it as a support system for whatever messaging you're trying to do, whatever product you're trying to sell, then you're going to get way more out of it. And of course, we can't talk about WordPress without talking about how friggin' customizable it is. And again, the more you work on this, the more deeper into the water you will wade. But if you can think of it, there's probably someone who built a WordPress plugin for it, or someone you can pay to do that part for you. You want it to be headless? You can be headless. You want it to run a vending machine? Try to find a link for you guys, but someone last year showed me 2 different vending machines that were running off of WordPress. It literally can do whatever you want if you're ready to hack into it. But for those of us who aren't technical per se, but we need to do the next step, it doesn't take long before in Wix, Weebly, or Squarespace, you're going to hit these walls of, I can't put that thing right where I need it, or it doesn't have all the functionality I want, or the only way for me to reach out to someone is to stick it in a forum and hope that they get a hold of me. With WordPress, you're getting, again, that huge wealth of knowledge and also that availability to build whatever you want, because it's open source. It's both a giant playground full of sand. Sometimes you get that sand in your butt crack, but it's okay. It's totally worth that itch. But speaking of that itch, I can't get into this because I don't think any CMS system is completely perfect without talking about the cons. And the biggest elephant in the room that I always like to yell at, throw peanuts out of it, and tell to get out of the room is WordPress is not easy. It's not a 5-minute install. It's not simple, just get up and go. And I think in the WordPress community, we have to be very careful that we don't conflate our ease of use with someone who, as we mentioned before, is just starting to get their toes wet with even being on the internet from a non-consumer perspective. So I do not think that WordPress is at all as easy as folks say it is. I firmly believe that we have to do more in our community to make sure that we're not, when someone comes and asks for help, we're not just saying, oh, that's easy, just click this and click this and click this and do that and then install your local thing. It's a great way to turn off someone from a content management system. So I don't think it's as easy as people will say. At the end of this presentation, I will give some quick tips of those who are starting out, how I think you can do better as far as feeling like you're not overwhelmed, because it's okay. We're all overwhelmed. There's developers in this room that are overwhelmed. We're not made of stone. We're people trying to interact with technology. The next thing about WordPress is people say it's free. That's not true. It's either going to cost you time or money, and you got to pick one. So what I mean by this is that either you're going to invest your own time, whatever that means, whatever you have available, whatever privileges that you have or do not have to create that space and time for yourself to do the work you want to do, or you're going to have to pay someone else to do it. Again, coming back to that idea that the more responsibility, the more options you have, the more responsibility you're going to have to carry forward. WordPress can get very mucky really fast. I noticed in our own WordPress meetup where we have new people who are really excited to see a change in something and then not realize they don't have the plugin. Well, they don't know what a plugin is. And then they realize that, well, they didn't update their core and they should do that first. And then, oh, it can be really tough. So I would say that it does take a lot of time and money. And I think there's, just because people can log in and access it through their hosting account doesn't necessarily mean that we are speaking honestly about how you can just get up and go with WordPress. What often occurs as well is people will buy online training, and I find that they're usually specific to a certain kind of theme. And so they get really indoctrinated into how that theme works, which is great. But a big con we covered in the chat earlier was the fact that there's no consistency inside of WordPress. There are best practices, there are ways that it should evolve, and as each release comes out, there's doing their best to kind of make that happen. But there's still a lot of the settings of a plugin could be found in the plugin, or could be found under the settings tab, or under the tools tab, or on the top of the admin bar. And so, you know, depending on people's learning abilities and how they access knowledge, that can be quite tough for them. So the other option, of course, is to pay someone for their time. And I firmly believe that just because WordPress is easy and just because everyone uses it does not mean it's any less valuable as a CMS from the knowledge base that professionals give to it. So a big con of WordPress, it's going to cost you time or money. Pick one or exchange them as need be. And a big one that I think that really turns people's eyes and their heads and their hair falls out and they start screaming is realizing that usually you're responsible for security, updates, and other techie stuff. So what I like to encourage with my clients and when I work with people on at the meetup is that when you enter the world of a CMS, you are leaving a consumer of the internet behind. We are going from using our smartphones where everything the work is done, we just drag and drop and tap as they give us. They're in the tech continuum now. And I don't just mean because you're not a developer that you're not in the tech continuum. If you are running a website, you are part of that. You're going to have to deal with things like your domain and registrar and where it's pointing and DNS. You have to deal with your security. A great analogy I like to say is, let's say that you rent inside of an apartment. It may be the job of your landlord to make sure that the foyer doors are locked, but if you leave your back door of your apartment or your windows open and someone steals something, that's still your responsibility. And that's something that people don't, it takes them a while to grapple with WordPress, is that even though my hosting company has some security and measure, I'm still ultimately in control of that. Privacy is another concern that people need to understand. Updating WordPress, unless you're going to buy into a maintenance package, either through your hosting company or through a third-party service provider, the technical stuff needs to happen. And I think that's a part of a critical area where people say that WordPress isn't secure. And I disagree. The problem is that because we've been leaving updates in the hands of other individuals, and I know the latest version of WordPress does it automatically, but we got to get everyone to the latest version first before we can really have that conversation, right? So when it comes to these sorts of things, you're responsible for this tech. Now, I don't necessarily think this is a con per se. I would say it's more of, sometimes we get so excited about the end product that we don't really know what we're getting in for. We buy a car because it's fast and it's sexy and it's going to drive me down the highway and take me where I want to go. But I don't know how to do an oil change. I don't know how to fix the window if it gets stuck. So these sorts of things happen to us in the natural world, but there's this disconnect with people when they get online and they have a website and they're like, it should just work. My Gmail just works. Squarespace just works. Not realizing that we are heralding our own technology. So for some people that can be very overwhelming, but for others, and I'm going to say especially I found in our meetup, anyone over the age of 60, they actually quite like this. They like the challenge of taking this heralding. They like the idea of learning the ins and outs and how this thing really works. Not even from a technical level, just understanding as a consumer. So in closing about why we have these pros and cons, I would list out the most common things I think about when I'm working with WordPress, but can also apply to any CMS at all. So the first thing is to understand is that tech is not perfect. There's a reason your cell phone updates. There's a reason that your security system is updated, or your internet provider will come in and give you a new modem. Being online, the technology of the internet moves very quickly. And because of that, we are all playing catch up. We are all pushing and pulling different updates and critical features. So the sooner you realize that building a website isn't instant without compromising what you have for flexibility, you're going to feel a whole weight off your shoulder. You're going to break stuff. You're going to delete stuff. You're going to have spellings, misspellings. It's okay. Technology isn't perfect when you're on the other side of the tech continuum. The next thing I would say for WordPress is don't just design it all by yourself, or don't work on it in a bubble. Join meetups. We're one. There's quite a few of them on here right now. Forums, Facebook groups, reach out, ask colleagues, Google it. I think there's a problem with us all that we want to, especially if we're in business and we know our business really well, we want to build a website as fast as we know how to talk about our business, or as fast as we know how to talk about our nonprofit. So I highly recommend that with WordPress or any CMS, if you get involved in a community, you can just ask a human really quickly your specific question and get it answered and move on with your day. I also recommend that you sketch it out before you step onto your computer. So we often have people come to our meetup and they'll say, well, what's the best theme? And it's like, well, my classic saying is, as a designer, I can't design a bucket for you unless I know it's going to hold 4 ice cubes or 4 elephants. Big difference in what you're going to need in a theme. And the same thing goes for when you're working on your website. Before you lose hundreds of hours of just like moving boxes around, deleting this and pushing that around, get off the computer, sketch it out, whether it's on paper or an Excel document or a Word document or on a whiteboard. Make sure that you understand what's happening from the user perspective of your site, and understand the why you're putting something together, so you don't fall down the rabbit hole of looking at 46 different gallery plugins or 36 different form plugins. Understand what you need before you get on that computer and get sucked into what it is to have a CMS system. I also recommend that you understand your hosting and domain situation. I do not recommend this, like I'm going to put it, it's being epitaph on my tombstone. Do not let someone else buy your domain for you and own it and have that register under their foot. Make sure you understand at the very base level when it comes to the property of what you have, that you have control over that you understand what your hosting actually gives you. Before you go out and get all these plugins, you want to make sure, for like a backup standpoint, you want to make sure that you actually understand, what does my hosting company backup? Over here in Canada, it's quite common for a hosting company to back up only to 30 days and then start overwriting after that 30 days. So it's important that while you want to have that balance of an easy to use website, you have to realize that there is some responsibility we all take as website owners. Just like having a house, you have to have home insurance. Just like having a car, you have to have car insurance. It doesn't really change in the technology world. And of course, save your sanity by paying professionals for things like security, updates, and performances. I'm absolutely sure we have lots of great providers here in Halifax, in Canada, and I know all over the world. If it costs you $75 a month, which I think is like, 75 for like 30 pounds a month, because everything in Canada is like 100 billion times more expensive. But I would say to you, if you really want to get into the content of your website, then pay a professional at the very minimum to do monthly security updates and performance. Don't waste your time in an area that you don't really need to know a lot about. You can hold a professional accountable to. And the same thing goes for custom work. I've often worked with clients or people who come to our meetup and they start off liking WordPress, and then they kind of get so deep inside what they're trying to achieve and they're way off on the deep end. They're sort of like, oh, I just hate WordPress now. But the way I would call that would be similar to as if I don't know how to make cabinets for my kitchen. And if I just went into the store and got a bunch of wood and got a bunch of nails and I started nailing, it wouldn't hold 2 cans of beans, let alone all of my dishes. But I wouldn't say cabinets are awful. It's just about understanding what you're trying to achieve with your tech and where your tech abilities lie. And of course, it's a great thing for the community is there's so many people willing to offer their time for free. And of course, we always recommend in our meetup set, if someone gives you their time and they help you out for 5 or 7 minutes, then maybe consider contracting them for additional work. And of course, as I said before, I'm always going to say, back up your damn work. If you didn't back it up again, back it up triplicate, because you never know when you're going to need it. So thank you, darlings. Mwah, done in 8 minutes.
There we go.
I'm
I'm
done.
going to unmute me. I'm going to unmute myself, and thank you very much for that, Alison, and a great way to end this month's discussion. We haven't had a bit of a comparison one in quite a while, to be honest, and it's quite nice to actually look at various different angles of what's out there. Where some you've basically went through a full summary of WordPress, which is great because this is WordPress North East. We had a discussion about sort of beginner level, and you've had the ones which are quite technical to build but really good for the customer. Does anyone have any questions for Alison? I know I've actually got one for you. You said you said about 5-minute install. Can you expand on that? Because I know, like, I have actually done one-click install through cPanel. I've only been doing it recently. But I know when you go down the normal route, you download the WordPress zip, you upload it to your host, you get your database, you link it, and there you go. What were you meaning by that?
I mean exactly what you're talking about. I'm talking about
Okay.
people like, WordPress is a 5-minute install, and people are like, what the fuck's a cPanel?
Yeah. Okay.
And
That's
that's the first part, right? So
okay.
that's one of the biggest parts there. And I excuse my language, but it's true. And I think that's the part that we need to be careful of in the WordPress community, is that
Yeah.
some of us haven't installed WordPress in 6 or 7 years. We need to realize that it's just time. People could have got their credit card, got a domain, and signed up for Squarespace in about 5 minutes, to be honest.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. Like, even though it's just a handful of time, I've had discussed with people in this room in the past. Like, what you know can be 5 or 10 minutes. By the time you install all your vital plugins, are the ones that you know you're definitely going to use. You've got to be in the right frame of mind to do it. Because I know fine well I get into it when I get started.
Well, and of course, this all depends on who we're talking to, right? Like
Hmm.
our meetup is more user based, although we do
Yeah,
have developer talks that happen, and we also have a lot of like marketers and designers that come in. So the marketers, designers, and developers, this is not our first rodeo. It's our job to do this. But for the person who comes in, they're like, I heard great things about WordPress. What the hell is a cPanel? What is a D in it? This is shit. And I just
Yeah.
wanted to make a blog. And so,
Yeah.
and I think it's not a problem. I think it's just that we have to be careful in the WordPress community that what we think is just is like brand
Yeah,
new.
that's
It's a
very
whole new world.
true. And what you just
Yeah.
said about cPanel, I've just started hosting cPanel hosting literally in the last 3 months. And I've kind of said if people are happy and understand it, it gives them the flexibility if they're comfortable to do so. But I think a lot of my client base will not go into it or are not comfortable to do so, and they're more happy to pay for me to do it for them. But it's more options out there depending on the user budget, depending on the user experience, and the user time. I think it all comes down to all that. There could be a triangle
I
you
just,
could make
in
out of that.
the end, I think it's a great CMS, and I just would hate for someone to go from Squares, and again, and I also think that a lot of people should move from WordPress to Drupal. Like October sounds friggin' amazing, but I think that when we're advocating for a CMS system, we just have to be really aware of what people's needs are, and
Yeah,
then the technical aspects second. So before we start jumping on like, oh, this plugin, or oh, this function, or oh, do this, it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
yeah.
whoa, whoa, what do they need done, and how can we get them as fast to that answer as possible? I think that's what we should all do in any CMS situation.
I fully agree, and I think this is a general conversation, especially the people who work here as developers or work in agencies. What your client wants and what you actually can do is like two different things. And when client can think, oh, can you do this, that, and that? Yeah, to the order, and it will take so long. How? And
Yeah.
or the other way, if it's the other way around, oh, it actually was really quick. It is interesting what a client, especially when they don't know, and this is kind of what you were saying before about the deeper you go, the more you realize how much she is. What can take 5 minutes, what can take 2 hours or more.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So any other questions for me before we do our and also I probably have to kick out too, because it's like 4:11 here, and some of us are still paying our lights and our half painted walls back here, you know. We got work to do.
Yeah. Right, I'll leave it to the room. Anyone got any questions? I believe there could be some. I know I'm just having a look through the comments. I say I know you can do migrations. You can do. If you can send me the link about that Rebecca Gill, by the way, I'm more than happy to post it on the meetup group. When you unmute yourself.
I'm just trying to find it here, but you're just gonna see my Google face. I'll try to find it.
Oh yeah, if you want to send me a later time, send to Richard.
Yeah.
Then either or, I'm happy with.
Alexander, yes?
Yes, hi there. Automatic updates with WordPress. Any comments on that?
But that only came out a couple of days ago.
Yeah, it literally just came out like yesterday.
But
I know. Oh, I don't know how to feel about it. I always turn it all off when I'm doing my own installs, but that's also because I'm probably going to be working with a service provider who's going to take care of my client websites after the fact. They're getting, I think I don't know. I guess my question would be for the developers, is that going to light a huge fire under asses because there's such a shorter time to make sure everything's going to be okay before pushing an update?
Yeah, I think it goes back to backups as well, or you look at down that route.
I
noticed
it would be difficult. You know, especially dealing with a large range of plugins, those automatic updates are going to cause quite an issue. We know it's quite a common occurrence where, especially if you haven't updated things in a while, like previously, you go to run those updates and all of a sudden you get a white screen in the front of your website. So yeah, I think I would agree with you, Alison. I would just turn off the automatic updates and just run them manually.
I think the longer you work with it, you get to know which plugins are going to be reliable and which ones that you can leave on automatic. There'll not be many, but there will be some. I haven't automated any. I'll tell you what I have done. I've automated all the themes. So the themes will all update.
Mm-hmm.
Because
So Andy, are you saying that I haven't, I mean, for being the WordPress lady, I haven't paid attention. Are you saying that in the newest update, you'll actually be able to say, I don't mean by putting things into the WP config file. Are you gonna be able to say in the front end dashboard which
Oh
plugins
yeah,
you
yeah.
now
There's a little
receive?
tick box on all plugins.
Oh,
You can
that's not
turn them
so
on or
bad.
off.
That's not so bad. Oh,
Oh,
okay.
it's really good, and I've noticed some actually disable it by default as well because they might be like, well, that might break. So some developers are being quite cautious with it, which is good. Just some people have a bit of a devil may care attitude, but yeah, you can use it, and this is what's really good about it as a feature. As a user, you can choose which ones you want to disable from automatic and which ones you don't, without being technical, which is the worst way of doing it.
Yeah,
I like it because I do a lot of volunteer work. And so if I'm hosting a site for a client who's not paying me, I like the idea of being able to put just a minimum number of plugins that they need and then select that they be automatically installed, especially those security plugins. Every now and then there's a bug that comes out in a plugin or even in a theme, and I get the report back from my security thing, then I got to log in and update it. So being able to automate it means less work for me.
Yeah. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, it's actually a user level, which is like administrator, but doesn't show the updates to that person. Or not, can it be configured? Because that's just
What did you say?
It does, yeah. I think it
Oh.
does. It hides it from normal users.
Yeah, that's interesting to know, because I think, like,
Editors.
just to say, oh, you've got 12 updates.
Yeah.
And some people will be like that.
Admin that gets those.
Yeah.
WordPress continues to migrate plugin functionality directly into the core. It's
That's good as well.
Yeah, they're going to have
a lot of things where you go, oh, there's so many bloody plugins that you're like having this one for that and this one for that. The more they get these like essential features that everybody uses and go, well, why aren't we making it part of core?
It does give you the opportunity to turn them off, but it's going to generate, the new one, 5.5, generates a sitemap now. They have automatic updates for themes and plugins, which you can turn on and off. They got some issues. They're going to have responsiveness for mobile, which is pretty wonky right now. And then their patterns that they're moving in there, that's going to be some great functionality, but that's still pretty early. So
I think they also have lazy loading by default now.
Yes.
With a separate plugin for that.
Another thing as well, we covered this in a talk last year, was that in one of the previous versions, they implemented an email notification system so that if your entire site goes down, it can basically give you an option to basically disable that plugin through remote access.
Yeah, I've had that
which
email
is, I
many
think,
times.
one of the things that they must have had to have enabled before automatic updates. So the whole thing's fantastic from that regard. You know, where you can go, oh, there's been an automatic update and it took my site down, but it's telling me that I just need to disable this plugin through an email, and then you just go click this link and it will roll back that plugin. That's the type of thing that you need to be able to happen before you can have automatic updates, which is good.
I will give one warning: if you're updating to 5.5, make sure that none of your plugins rely on older jQuery, because they've boosted the version of jQuery. They've also removed jQuery Migrate. Now, that's had massive problems on a load of my sites. A few of them I've had to roll back to 5.4.2. They have actually released a plugin. It's called Restore jQuery Migrate, and that does fix a lot of the problems.
Yeah. So I think you're basically saying there, just make sure you've got a bit of a runway of spare time before you hit that update.
Oh, absolutely, because there's going to be some huge problems with this one. It really is.
Yeah, that's why I've not gone through all of mine yet, because I want to know that I've got like a day free the day after to then either if I spot issues I can fix them, or if clients like, oh, I spot something different. Yeah.
I actually installed a nifty plugin a little while ago for issues with plugins, and it's a rollback plugin. So basically, it gives the option just per, like me being a dumb user, not having to, manually faff around with anything. You can just hit the rollback to previous version, and it even gives you a little list where you can go, oh, that one was the last stable one.
Yeah. Yeah, I do like that, and I think a lot of us who's been using WordPress for years in this room have seen how much it's grown, considering it started off as just as a blog platform initially, and now, and I think as that statistic that you showed, Alison, it is kind of one of your major sort of platforms for especially your either small medium businesses, or um or more your hobbyists. And but it all depends on your knowledge and experience and time and money as well. But it is kind of, I've seen a lot of growth in WordPress, and it's a lot more easier to get your head around. Like I know when Gutenberg came out, I think that made a bit of a difference for people who've never used WordPress for the first time.
It was a bit rough when it first came out, though.
True. I remember doing that presentation back in January last year. You also see a poll on your screen, and I've got the results showing up on my screen. 10 out of 14 people in this room are just as answered, and it's 100% result for WordPress. Now, I don't expect anything less. Well, I just wanted to see if anyone did have anything different, by the way.
Tiny bit biased.
Yeah, on a WordPress North East group, yeah. I just want to see if anything changed across the board. But 11 out of 14 is polled, and yeah, it is 100%. So the poll has now ended. Yeah, there we go. I just wanted to put that. I did say I would put that out there. But yeah, I'm gonna say thank you very much to everyone in the room. So yeah, thank you, Matthew, for your presentation to start off with. I'm trying to think. Has the other speaker gone? I'll just have a look at the list. I'm looking at the co-host. Yeah, I think. Yeah, so of course we wasn't here. And great show from you, Alison. So thank you very much.